So, good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be connected to all of you. So, as you all know, I'm Dr. Surbhi Madan, infectious diseases consultant at SIMS Hospital. We have taken this initiative to discuss about various important aspects of coronavirus and COVID-19. So, what we have decided is that in the coming next 1 week, we will be discussing about different topics on COVID-19, and we will be having, we will be discussing, and if you have any questions, you can always ask and solve your queries. So before starting today's presentation, just three important points. The first thing is that I have muted all of you. So if you want to ask any questions, please drop your questions in the chat box. At the end of the session, we have kept 10 minutes for question answer session. So whatever questions you put in the chat box, I will answer to them. Also, today's topic is epidemiology and clinical features of COVID-19. And similarly, we will be discussing about various different aspects of COVID during the next 1 week. So please stick to the questions which are pertaining to today's topic only. If you ask me any questions which are out of today's topic, they will be taken up by the respective speakers who have got their topic related to your question. So please stick to the epidemiology and clinical features only today. So now we start the today's topic. So I am going to discuss about epidemiology and clinical features. Now, epidemiology is one subject which we as clinicians are not very much interested into. But as we all know that coronavirus, novel coronavirus is a new virus and COVID-19 is a new disease for us. And whenever we have any new infection coming up, which we have to deal with, especially in the era of pandemic or epidemics, it's extremely important. Actually, it is the most important thing to know about the epidemiology of the organism, because only then we will be able to decide on the infection control measures. We will be able to decide on the various aspects in the management of the disease. So as we all know, so the story began in December 2019, where in China, in the Hubei province, Wuhan city, they identified a cluster of pneumonia cases, which they could not identify the reason for. And later on, it was found to be caused by an unknown virus till now, which is now named as SARS coronavirus 2 or 2019 novel coronavirus. So coronavirus are basically, sorry, I want to go to the previous slide. Okay. So most of these cases, they were found to be epidemiologically linked to the Wuhan seafood market. And how they found this virus is, basically they collected the bronchoalveolar lavage sample of some of these patients who were admitted in the hospitals in Wuhan and Beijing. And then they did the whole genome sequencing, the direct PCR and the cultures, that is the viral cultures. And that is how they identified this pathogen, which they found was phylogenetically very closely related to the SARS virus. Yes, the epidemic which happened in 2002-2003. And hence it was given the name SARS coronavirus 2. So like the earlier epidemic causing coronaviruses, that is SARS and MERS, this is also a zoonotic virus, and this has been presumed to be transmitted from bats. We really don't know, is there an intermediate host in between? But yes, we know that it is most likely it has come from the bats. So coronaviruses is a very large group of viruses, and they are not new to us. They are basically a group of almost 150 viruses, but only about 6 species were known to cause diseases in human till now. Now, most of these viruses, at least 4 of these, as you can see here, they cause usually very mild disease, and they are responsible for around 15 to 30% of the community acquired upper respiratory tract infections which happen in the community. However, the deadly strains, that is the SARS coronavirus and the Middle East respiratory syndrome coronavirus, they are the viruses which caused epidemics in the past, and they are zoonotic in origin, and they have been linked to the sometimes fatal illnesses. So as you can see in this table, SARS epidemic started in 2002 and ended in 2003. Again, the country of origin was China. The total number of people which were infected at that time were around 8,422 persons, and the mortality rate was around 14% in SARS. On the other hand, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome virus, that is MERS, that caused epidemic in 2012, and there the country of origin was Saudi Arabia. Total 1,143 people were infected with this virus, but the mortality rate was extremely high, as you can see, 37%. Now, neither of these two viruses affected us, that is India. However, this novel coronavirus, that is SARS-CoV-2, which we are dealing with now, this originated in China again, and till date it has infected almost 2 million people all over the world, and the mortality rate has been varying in different studies, but it is somewhere from 0.5 to 3%. Again, I'll discuss later on how the case fatality rate and mortality rate, it varies among different groups and different areas. So on 30th of January 2020, it was declared as a public health emergency of international significance. And on 11th of March 2020, WHO declared COVID-19, that is the disease caused by a novel coronavirus, as a pandemic. Just admit it. Okay, so this is the data from the Johns Hopkins site as of today morning. As I have already told you, about 2 million people have been infected by SARS-CoV-2, and almost 1,19,687 deaths have happened. So it is really a matter of grave concern. Now, where did these viruses come from, or where did this novel coronavirus come from? So basically, these are all zoonotic viruses, SARS, MERS, and SARS-CoV-2. MERS originated mostly in the camels. SARS originated in the civet cats. And we really don't know where from the SARS-CoV-2 has come. But these usually infect the animals, and whenever they infect the humans, it is called spillover. It is accidental transmission to humans, and usually it happens in two circumstances: whenever there is some genetic mutation in the virus, or when the proximity of the human beings is extremely it is increased to the animals, as it happened in the seafood market in Wuhan. So talking about the structure of these novel coronavirus, for that matter, all coronaviruses. So as you can see here, it is a RNA virus. It is a single-stranded RNA virus. There is a nucleocapsid which is covering the genome. And as you can see here, there is a spike protein. There are multiple proteins on the envelope. There is a spike protein, which is the most important protein, which actually attaches to the receptors, which are mostly ACE2 receptors, which are present in the respiratory and the gastrointestinal tract in human beings. There is another receptor, there is another protein called HA protein, which mediates the fusion of viral and the host cell membrane. Now we discuss about the routes of transmission. So this is the first study, that is the study of the first 425 cases in Wuhan, which were admitted with confirmed novel coronaviruses infected pneumonia till January 22nd. So what they found is that before January 1st, 2020, 55% of the cases would be linked to the Huanan seafood market. On the other hand, after January 1st, only 8.6% of the cases could be linked. So what does that actually indicates is that there is significant human to human transmission occurring. And now, as we all know, the main mode of transmission of this novel coronavirus is human to human transmission only. So it spreads from person to person. It mainly affects very, very close contacts like families and other close contacts and clusters. The routes of transmission is mainly droplets. So what are droplets? Droplets are basically deposits more than 5 microns, which consist of some viral particles and other mucosa and saliva. And what happens is whenever the patient speaks or sneezes or coughs, they are directly deposited by the patient to the person who is close by. For that matter, in a distance of 3 to 6 feet. So that is the distance to which droplets can actually travel. Or if the droplets have settled down on some surfaces, so these surfaces get contaminated, and from there we can acquire these droplet infections. Now, we have read about a lot of articles and a lot of WhatsApps have been circulating that this could actually get transmitted through aerosols also. Why is that a matter of concern? Because aerosols are basically very small particles which are less than 5 microns in size, and they do not follow the distance limitations. So they can travel up to long distances, and they do not settle down. They remain suspended in the air for quite a long period of time. So aerosol transmission has definitely been found as one of the routes of transmission, but it's not that common. It is mainly indicated during aerosol generating procedures, like when we are intubating the patient, or when the patient is on non-invasive ventilation, or when bronchoscopies are done, or when the patient coughs loudly. So all these procedures are aerosol generating procedures where aerosols can be the mode of transmission. This virus has also been isolated from the feces and the blood of patients, but we really don't know what is the significance of fecal-oral transmission yet. So there are no cases which have been described where the fecal-oral mode of transmission is found. Now we will discuss some important epidemiological terms which we need to understand when we are dealing with this pandemic. So first is the period of infectivity. What do we mean by that? Period of infectivity means when a patient is suffering from COVID-19, for how long or for how much period of time he can infect the other persons. So SARS coronavirus 2 can be transmitted prior to development of symptoms and throughout the course of illness. However, the transmission is more likely in the early stages of illness, as it has been found in studies that viral RNA levels are higher soon after the symptom onset compared with later in the course of illness. Now, one thing which we really need to understand here is that the viral PCR, which we are testing regularly, that may not actually correlate with the viral cultures, and that may not translate into the infectivity actually. Because what they found is that in a study, in patients who were suffering with mild COVID-19, the sputum and the nasopharyngeal swabs, when viral cultures were done from those samples, it became negative in 1 week, within 1 week of the onset of symptoms. However, viral RNA PCR, that was found to be positive for quite a long period of time. So we really don't know whether the PCR being positive actually translates into persistence infectivity or not. We need more data on that. Again, severity of infection is also important, because it has been found that patients who are suffering from more severe disease, their infectivity to other people can be more in the terms of duration of infectivity. Now, Another one thing which is very important in SARS-CoV-2 is that asymptomatic persons can also spread infection. And in various studies, the prevalence of asymptomatic persons has been found to be as high as 20 to 50%. So these are the group of patients where we don't have any symptoms and still they are transmitting their infection in community to other people. So this is a matter of major concern when we talk about COVID-19. Next, we talk about the incubation period and serial interval. So what do we mean by incubation period? That is the period between the acquiring the infection and the onset of symptoms. So the time interval between these 2 points is called the incubation period. Now it has been found to be 2 days, as early as 2 days to 2 weeks, the average being 5 to 6 days, and 97.5% of the patients, they develop infection within 12 days, and 99% they should develop infection within 14 days after the they should develop symptoms within 14 days after acquiring the infection. So that is how the 14 days quarantine period comes from. Now if we talk about the serial interval is basically in a chain of transmission. Whenever two persons, two subsequent persons get infected, that is the interval between them. So that again has been found to be somewhere around 6 to 7 days. Now, what is this R naught? That is the basic reproduction number. This is an extremely important epidemiological entity for the epidemiologists whenever we are facing any pandemic. So that has been found to be around 2 to 3 for SARS-CoV-2. It is defined as the average number of persons which are infected by each patient, by a single patient in a population of susceptible hosts, which means that people are not having any immunity to this new infection. So there we have to calculate R naught. Now figures as high as R naught of 6 also have been described in literature, but it is highest at the beginning of the pandemic, because as the pandemic goes on, as the pandemic progresses, the R naught decreases with the development of immunity in the population and also the application of the control measures. Again, what is the aim of the control measures? It is to decrease the R naught to 1 or less than 1. Next, we talk about secondary attack rate. Now, what is secondary attack rate? It is the proportion of close contact persons which are infected by a single patient. For example, I'll give you an example of secondary attack rate among the household contacts in various countries. For example, in China, 15% of the household contacts were infected by a single index patient. So it is very high. Similarly, in United States, it is 10.5%, and in Korea, it is 7.6%. It is and if we see the secondary attack rate in the close contacts, apart from the household contacts, you can see here it is quite low. So it is 1 to 5% in China, 0.45% and 0.55% in United States and Korea, respectively. You must have heard about the Diamond Princess cruise ship. So there, 50% of the cases were asymptomatic, as they found in the contact tracing and by doing the PCRs. And later on, 18% of them were found to be true asymptomatic, which did not develop any symptoms at all at any point of time. So what I need to emphasize here is that this is a virus which gets very easily transmissible among very close contacts and high secondary attack rates amongst the family members, that is the household contacts. Now, SARS-CoV has got very high phylogenetic similarity to SARS-CoV-2, but still we are not able to control SARS-CoV-2, that is COVID-19 pandemic, as we were able to do in 2002 when we have faced an epidemic with SARS-CoV. So there are major differences between these two infections, and let us see what are those. So first is that infectious period is different. For example, as I already told you, that in SARS, which happened in 2002, the maximum viral shedding was found at the peak of the illness. So the patients were not very transmissible before the onset of symptoms, and after the disease, after they became symptom free. On the other hand, in COVID-19, what we are finding is that even the patients who are asymptomatic, who are in the incubation period, and even after the disappearance of symptoms, the people are highly infectious. Patients are highly infectious, and that is one of the reasons why it is spreading so much in the community. Second is that the transmissibility might be higher for COVID-19 as compared to SARS. As I already mentioned, the R naught value is around 2 to 3 for COVID-19. In SARS, the R naught value was a little lower. The clinical spectrum is entirely different. In SARS, we did not have so many asymptomatic patients as we are finding in COVID-19, to a range of 20 to 50% in the community. And fourth is that community spread is extremely prominent in COVID-19. So we all know that SARS targeted specific groups, and there the main group of people which were infected, which were found to be infected, is the healthcare workers. So it was found mainly in the hospitals. On the other hand, COVID-19 is mainly found in the community. And of course, world has changed a lot since 2002. If we talk about China itself, the density of population, the globalization, the transport facilities, everything has changed so much that controlling the pandemic in the earlier part of illness was really difficult for China. So now we talk about the clinical features of the infection. So this infection basically, this is a study from 138 patients from Wuhan, where the median age was found to be around 56 years. And unfortunately or fortunately, males have been found to be infected more than females, as in almost all the studies. Fever, fatigue, dry cough, anorexia, myalgias, dyspnea, these are the main symptoms which the patient present with. So we cannot really differentiate mild disease from a flu, an influenza. Sputum protection is less common, to the range of around 27%. And this is a study of almost around 1099 patients, where one thing which we need to note is that on admission, only 44% of the patients had fever. Ultimately, 88% of them, they develop fever during hospitalization. So these patients may present without fever, they may present just with the normal sore throat, or sometimes uncommon symptoms like anosmia or dysgeusia, that is problems, that is aberration in the smell and the taste. So this is a study where 34% of the patients self-reported either smell or taste aberration, and 19% reported both. Uncommon symptoms are headache, sore throat, rhinorrhea, diarrhea, vomiting, and abdominal pain. Now, what is the natural course and complications? Around 44,500 people, confirmed cases who were reported to Chinese CDC, Chinese Center for CDC. What they found is that 81% of the patients had very mild disease. So it was a self-recovering disease. And around 14% of patients had severe disease, which was defined as a respiratory rate of more than or equal to 30, saturation less than or equal to 93%, PO2 by FiO2 less than or equal to 300, and more than 50% of the lung involvement on imaging within 24 to 48 hours. Critical disease which needed ICU admission and intubation, where the patients presented with respiratory failure, shock, and multi-organ dysfunction, was found in around 5% of patients. And in this study, what they found is that the case fatality rate was around 2.3%. Now, the most common complication which leads to mortality most of the times is ARDS. So what they found is that dyspnea developed after a median of 5 days in these patients after admission, and ARDS developed in 20 to 41% of patients after a median of 8 days. Other complications, what are found in various studies, are arrhythmias, acute cardiac injury, shock, thromboembolic complications, macrophage activation syndrome, and HLH. That also is being described very commonly in studies now. So these patients actually, they present with a cytokine storm, and that is the main reason for complications in this disease, and which actually leads to, that is the most common reason for mortality. Now, what are the risk factors for severe illness? Advanced age, that has been found to be the most important factor which is associated with a severe disease. Cardiovascular disease, diabetes, hypertension, and less commonly chronic lung disease, cancer, and chronic kidney disease. So this is a study where they found what were the risk factors associated with the clinical severe disease. And what they found is, as you can see here, the p-value is very significant in patients who are old aged, who have coronary artery disease, who have hypertension followed by diabetes. Females are protected with a negative p-value. What are the investigations? So most commonly we found leukopenia, possibly lymphopenia in more moderate and severe diseases, though leukocytosis also may be present in a few patients. Now, what are the markers of severe disease? Lymphopenia is the hallmark. Similarly, other markers of severe disease which are associated with a negative prognostic value are high CRPs, high ferritin, high LDH value, increased transaminases, high D-dimer, prothrombin time, troponin, CPK, acute kidney injury, and a neutrophil or lymphocyte ratio more than 3. And this is my last slide, which is about case fatality rate. So how do you define it? It is the number of deaths which occur because of COVID-19 divided by the actual cases of the infection. So this is actually a function of the severity of disease plus the ability of the healthcare system to control the disease. And what we need to understand is that case fatality rate, in a pandemic, it actually varies during different periods. For example, if we talk about Wuhan, it when they could apply good infection control measures, when they were in good control, the case fatality rate decreased from 5 to around less than 1%. And it may vary among different countries, actually within the country. For example, the case fatality rate in Wuhan as compared to other parts of China was very high. So it will depend on a lot on epidemiology and the burden on the healthcare system. Also, the host factors may be responsible for differing case fatality rate. For example, it is significantly different in stable versus critical patients. So those patients who are admitted in ICU, who are ventilated, there the case fatality rate may be as high as around 20% as compared to the overall case fatality rate of around 0.5 to 2 to 3%. And of course, it may vary as per the different age groups and the comorbidities. So summarizingly, SARS-CoV-2 is a novel challenge for the whole world. Epidemiology and clinical features are different from the already known human coronaviruses. There is a high proportion of asymptomatic patients, so we need to be really very on the toes. I mean, it's a very difficult disease to get under control. And most of the cases are mild and self-recovering. That is a good news. The risk factors which are associated with severe disease are old age, cardiovascular disease, hypertension, and diabetes. And our knowledge about the virus and disease still seems to be far lesser as compared to the magnitude of the pandemic. And we really need a lot of data still about the disease. Thank you.